Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it's the last talk of the day, so I appreciate your time. I would like to share with you a little bit of lessons that I learned about ecosystems in Web3 space, right? There is a lot of chains, protocols, apps that are working to grow their own ecosystem, and it's interesting to see what they're doing in order to try to succeed. 2 words about myself. I've been in crypto since 2017. I spent my last 4 years working for an interoperability protocol called Everclear, previously Connext. We scaled it to over 1 billion at the height. And then recently, I've been collaborating very tightly with the Arbitrum DAO in particular. So at the Arbitrum DAO, I'm one of the delegates for the DAO itself, but I also provide grants to builders. So if you're building something cool after the talk, feel free to come and we can explore what we can do together. Basically, working with an interoperability protocol and now the grant ecosystem, it was very like I had a lot of opportunities to see what different chains, what different platforms were doing, and I would like to share a little bit of the learnings. I think the most important part is that all these protocols, all the chains today, they want to act as a platform, but they haven't really managed to get to the escape velocity where the innovation autonomously happen like from the outside. They always try to act as those public neutral goods, and that simply doesn't work. I was talking with one of the sponsors downstairs before, and I was asking them, okay, so this sounds fantastic, right? A magical framework and platforms. So what can you actually build? And I said, yeah, you can build whatever you want. And I don't think that is viable today anymore as an approach. And if you want to win, right, you might want to look at some specific elements, like getting adoption, right, getting a sustainable revenue income from what you're doing, right. Winning is still a very cloudy, very a blurred element in Web3, but there are some things that we can take from the different ecosystems to learn what they're doing and what they want to achieve. So I want to actually start from a step back on looking at some tech platforms, some other tech projects that exist in the world. We think in Web3 we always have to invent the wheel every time, but there are a lot of things that we can learn from existing, from other projects, of course. The first one is Microsoft, right? Microsoft was born with a vision of being an operating system, right? A platform for other apps, but they actually built the first app themselves, right? Office was the first kind of party app on Microsoft, and that kind of justified other people coming in. And the same thing happened to Apple, for example, right? They built the first apps on the iPhone, right? They built a camera app, they built the iMessage, the Notes, and then kind of justified other people coming and building on top of it. So the concept here is, yes, you want to be a platform, but you always want to have, maybe what has brought platforms to succeed was actually kickstarting the innovation, kickstarting the use cases on your platform itself, because that's what unlocks other people to come in. At the same time, the risk that you have when you build something is that you end up monopolizing the innovation. So this is something that Binance did, for example. They started with a very opinionated approach, and they said, hey, we're going to build this piece, this primitive, and this app, and all the focus is going to be on that. And so what happened afterwards, what happened is that they first grew immensely, right? They had a huge start thanks to Binance, of course. But then there was not enough innovation happening from outsiders because there was no, it was not perceived as a neutral platform anymore. And then people were saying, okay, I might go somewhere else when I might get actual support because I'm coming not as an insider. And so you have to find a balance between the two. And so what is a strategy that the majority of platforms and ecosystems are using today? They are building what I define as pipelines. So pipelines are a series of concatenations of tools and protocols and maybe apps themselves that help either builders to come and build new stuff or users to have a better experience, so then builders come and they can provide a better experience to the users themselves. All of these should always fall under the vision of your ecosystem, but it's critical to think in terms of, okay, what pipeline can I build to empower either my builders or my users at the end of the day? And so let's look a little bit at what type of pipelines that you can build. Right, there are pipelines that focus on the product side, others instead focus on the marketing side. So how do you actually bring your apps in front of users? And as we will see, they are becoming more and more important as the technology becomes more commoditized. Yeah, these are some of the examples. I'm going to go through some use cases and some of the projects that I find interesting. If you have questions, if you have a different opinion, feel free to stop me. But let's get started. Let's start from payments. Payments is one of the early basic use cases for crypto, and they actually come. They can be segmented into various steps that are necessary to enable fluid payments and efficient payments onto your ecosystem. You might look at how to onboard people, right? The easiest way to onboard people. You might look at what's the best way for those people that you onboard to manage the risk, to manage their assets, and ultimately to spend the tokens, to spend the assets that you have brought them onto your ecosystem. One example in this type of pipeline that I really appreciate in these days is what Gnosis is doing. The Gnosis team looked at the state of their Gnosis chain and said, okay, we roughly have 300,000 validators on the Gnosis chain, so it's a very decentralized chain. We are relatively fast and super cheap. What can we do? Okay, let's actually build a full payment pipeline so that any project that comes on Gnosis, any user that comes on Gnosis is able to spend the money in the most efficient and secure way, combining all the different Lego blocks that they were building. And so they partnered with Monerium to enable fast on-ramp for euros, for example. They started buying companies like HQ, which allows corporates and businesses to manage their assets on chain. They built they built and spin off some specific pieces that they wanted to have in their payment system, like swaps, with cow swap without any basically being MEV resistant. The Safe wallet, which is one of the most used wallets today, and then ultimately Gnosis Pay with their cards that kind of like channels all these pipelines into the end state. And this is another interesting thing, because what they did with Safe, right, they managed to spin it off as a very neutral product. And that's what became actually what enabled them to become a very big success. So Safe is not exclusive to the Gnosis ecosystem, even if it was owned initially by the Gnosis team. But it actually partnered with other players like WorldCoin, like Polymarket, and now with 43 million deployments, they have the highest market share among the smart wallets, let's say, in the space. So lessons learned here could be like, hey, what I'm building, what I do for my pipelines doesn't have to be exclusive from my ecosystem, but if I can export it, I can actually bring in back more value into what I'm trying to do. Another typical pipeline that ecosystems and chains and projects look at is the DeFi one. DeFi ultimately is the ability to give a price to something, and that something can be a native asset like Ethereum. It can be a real-world asset like a house or a T-bill. It can be data, right? It can be pure data that have value. It can be synthetics, so a manipulation or the forecast of some other assets. And taking that type of asset, pricing it, and then allow people to either speculate or hedge, right? This is the very basic definition of DeFi. And within this, all the different ecosystems are trying to specialize and trying to bring in a unique angle into ultimately a flow that can attract attention and money to the users. This is an example for Mode. Mode used to be a generalized layer 2 built on the OP stack. Now they kind of like pivoted into an app chain. And so what they said is that, okay, DeFi is very general topic. Let's specialize onto the convergence between AI and DeFi. And let's build a tool for users to trade onto new type of data, onto new type of stuff that is not possible today. So they first built a predictive data model using bit tensors from Tau. That allows basically to do predictions onto, right now it's native assets like Bitcoin and Ethereum, but they're going to extend it onto any type of assets. Then they built a terminal themselves where you can actually interact with these agents, asking very specific questions like, hey, this guy has a 100 million ETH long with 25 leverage. What's the probability of liquidation? And so, this overall engine allows people to do new type of things, and then they let them execute them using a perp engines that which is basically a white label version of the orderly network. So they kind of built these different pieces to allow what their vision is and what they want to enable in terms of experience on their platform. Interoperability is another typical one, right? Every chain looks at how do we onboard, or every app looks at how do we onboard users in the easiest way possible. And so they need all these different pieces in place in order to have the smoother experience for somebody who has just bumped into your app or into your chain to actually use it, right? You want to bring liquidity there as soon as possible. You want to allow users to deposit or do an action there as soon as possible. And so all the different chains look at the various stages at these different pieces to facilitate this type of experience. And so Optimism, for example, Optimism said, okay, we will provide a very opinionated kind of flow for the chains and the applications that are built into our ecosystem. First providing a messaging transport layer, which is what they call the super chain. Then they partnered with Across, which was one of the top bridges to provide fast transfers across the different apps, across the different chains and apps. And they are also lending liquidity to the different solvers. So when you start a new chain, you have liquidity, and then you can immediately execute, like you can immediately onboard users into their apps. And this is a kind of a pipeline that you want ecosystems to have with your app, right? I'm launching a new chain, and then I go to Optimism, and Optimism tells me, hey, you know what? On day one, you can have this immediate pipeline as a service that kind of flows into your app, into your ultimate app, and onboarding your users. We started to see a little bit what type of pipelines, what the different approaches to build the pipelines, right? You can decide to build ones like Gnosis normally does, or invest like Coinbase can do, for example, or simply attract, right? If you have enough moat to be able to, inspire other builders to come and use the same kind of liquidity or assets or unique advantage that you have. That's an ideal case scenario, and I think that's what Hyperliquid is doing very well right now. Hyperliquid exploded with their perp protocol, and now they built their own layer one, and so they are encouraging people to come to their platforms, to their ecosystem, by giving them the idea that they can share the same liquidity, share the same users and order flow that they have. Or, right, ultimately you can combine, partner, use other solutions to create the flow that and the experience that you want to have. All right, another couple of examples, and then I'll jump into what we're doing at Arbitrum. Because I think it follows this type of philosophy. Solana, I think they're doing great things in terms of pipeline. They're doing experiments that would allow them to ultimately have users on board in the most easy possible, or in the seamless way possible. Either by a mobile experience with Phantom, right, their wallet, which I think it was critical to the success of Solana, with their Solana phone directly. They started this attestation service where you can KYC at a Solana level. They're bringing stocks on chain, right? They're bringing the payment card, right? All these experiments that Solana is doing is ultimately to create this very easy flow of money for everybody that builds on Solana. This is another example in the Solana ecosystem, right? Phantom started with a simple wallet, and now they are evolving into other type of products as they are following basically the money. So they're looking at what the users are doing, and they're saying, okay, this is where they spend the most money from. Let's actually integrate that into our core flow so they can make more money out of it. Culture is another great pipeline to consider when you're building an ecosystem. Culture basically embodies a little bit how you present, how you approach other players. And then it can be really composed into different elements. I think a project that is doing particularly well is Abstract. If you heard about them, it's a layer 2. They are encouraging streamers. Instead of like they were launching a new chain, and they said, okay, the market is very crowded. How do we differentiate ourselves? How do we convince people to come and build on Abstract? And how do we convince users to come and use the apps on Abstract? And so what they did, they called hundreds of streamers, and they said, now we incentivize you to stream about the applications that we build, and we'll build a whole pipeline around the smooth onboarding and the smooth interactions to hook you up into our ecosystem. So what you can do, basically, you launch an app on Abstract, people start streaming about your application, so they start showcasing what they can do. Users that they found about it are onboarded by Pravi, which is a one-click wallet. And then within the streaming itself, you can tip, you can chat with other people, right? You're immediately hooked into their ecosystem by this onboarding pipeline. Last one, I think, it's Coinbase. Right, Coinbase is doing a lot of fantastic things. I think they're very strategic about their pipeline building. Right, the money machine, the cash cow is Coinbase, but now they're trying to channel more towards Base as they see that as the future of where the market is going. And so everything that they've done so far was basically a way to increase the attention and the usage that Base gets while leveraging the existing product that Coinbase has built so far. So for example, they have a very tight partnership with the Farcaster, and so they have this easy on-ramp method by their stacks, right? That's the primary use case right now. So they onboard by their centralized exchange into their own wallet, and their wallet, they can now promote a feed of messages coming from Farcasters. They bought Spindle, which is an ads and contest platform, so they can also show ads if they want. And once they kind of like hooked you into this social network, or net of social interactions, they will push you towards using apps on Base itself. They're doing something similar with the development platforms, the agent toolkit, right? They are literally building all these streams looking to basically ease the onboarding and building of apps on their applications or on their platforms, and it's working great. Sometimes things don't always go right. Blast was a case where they actually built a very interesting pipeline because they had the different components that you would think will make it successful, like a default yield system where any stable coin deposited there was accruing interest, a mobile app, they have connections with the big NFT platforms, they had early social fi projects, and yet they didn't succeed. I mean, the project is in decline because probably they focused on the token price, the token farming very, very early and for too long, and they didn't manage to retain users after the airdrop. So, last couple of bits about what we're doing at Arbitrum. We have analyzed this type of dynamics, and we're now building pipelines for builders themselves. So what we want to tell them, a new builder that comes in is, hey, you have a great idea. You can come through this funnel, and get the support that you need at the different stages. So it's easier for you to succeed, because when an app succeeds, obviously Arbitrum also succeeds. And so this is the ultimate goal of the DAO that supports the ecosystem. So we support you through the different phases, right? Whether you come with an idea and need a team, whether you need some feedback from the market, whether you need some early fundings, that's what the grant program does, or whether you need distribution, right? Every chain, every platforms ultimately moves from being a simple tech provider, which becomes commoditized on the long term, towards a distribution provider. As we saw with Abstract, as we saw with Base and Coinbase, the ultimate differentiator, the ultimate advantage that the platforms can provide is the distribution part. And so what I think the ultimate pipeline is for this type of layer 2s and maybe some of the protocols that exist today in Web3 is to bring a pipeline that brings you into the real world, right? It doesn't stay in an abstract like Ponzi self-recurring scheme, but it ultimately goes to where people are, where businesses are. And so this is what we are trying to build. We are supporting projects that actually get in the hands of people and businesses in the real world. This is one of the examples that I like the most. This is called Dual Mint. Dual Mint basically allows you to, it's a project that is built on Arbitrum, allows you to invest into local businesses that have recurring revenue coming in, like laundry, washing machines, arcade games. Now they're doing AC installations in Hong Kong for now. But the idea is that we help those businesses actually getting boots on the ground, right? The DAO and other these ecosystems have people across the world, and we can help those businesses come on chain. Local Cash is another good example. They bring data from businesses on chain using zero knowledge proofs, and with that data, they allow municipalities to provide under-collateralized loans. So a business can say, "Hey, this is my financial health. Basically, I want to expand and build a new room, and so this is how I prove that I'm actually making money." And then the municipality can look at it, in a transparent way and say, "Hey, okay, I will lend you the money because I want to invest into this local economy." And with the same concept now, we are looking at what type of data farmers can bring on chain, for example, and how can government, based on that data, provide loans for specific areas. And with that, it's very easy to expand this pipeline or expand their pipelines into the different businesses that they might need this type of use cases. The last example that I want to bring is the Arbiverse. So it's a series of events that are itinerant across the world where people can come and play the games that are built on top of Arbitrum. So you basically have, now here I have a test ground for your game where we bring you the users, you build the game and then we bring you the users across the world to play and start basically being onboarded on chain. Yeah, that was it. I think that, if you have to remember 3 things from this talk, the first is, and you're building an ecosystem and you're building a platforms. The first one is you should build tools that help people that want to build with you succeed, right? Whether it's users, whether it's actual builders and developers. You can do that either by investing or building or attracting or partnering with something that exists already. And ultimately, right, the goal, I think, the whole movement, but ideally of your ecosystem should to bring real impact to people. And so Crypto Cities, the idea that we can onboard users and businesses by this pipeline is something that is still being explored and to get excited about. Thank you. If you have questions.
Oh, don't worry, you went over 5 minutes ago.
I know about it.
I see why you lasted the day. You have a lot to say. Yeah. So do we have any questions from the audience here today? Everybody's so silent today. They're so scared. So do you try to get a lot of people over to Arbitrum from cross-chain over to Arbitrum to be able to have more in there?
Yes. So the primary goal is to have builders on Arbitrum, because users come when there are builders. If there are more users, then Arbitrum makes more money as a chain, and so they can reinvest more money into these pipelines. And so we have marketing, like users-directed marketing, but the DAO specifically now focuses on be bringing in more builders and people that want to build new type of stuff.
So when you get people over, are you more interested in the amount of transaction or the amount of volume going through?
Good question. I don't think there is one north metric. It depends a lot on the type of things that you're building. Arbitrum is very big on DeFi. So TVL in that case is very big, like how much money is being put into vaults. But now we're looking at AI and gaming, and so in that case, it's more about the number of transactions that you do on chain once you're onboarded.
Yeah, actually, it was a personal question because I work with a few projects that always can use something fun, and I know one that is going to be a gambling project that is actually last-minute transactions into a timer on the blockchain.
Okay.
That could make volume, amount of transactions, but not the big volume, but the transactions themselves.
Yeah, exactly. That would be interesting to chat with.
We can always set it up.
Absolutely.
Do we have any questions that is coming up? So I see we're having everybody wants to go take a drink today, I think.
do it.
That's also why I gave you 5 minutes more. I was like, say, you have the things to say, but I have a few people that might want to talk with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Max.
Thank you,
Everybody
guys.
a hand for Max. Oh, there we go. They're waking up down the back end.
And is there a plan or in the roadmap of Arbitrum to get the transactions also cheaper in like the next year or something like that? There is a plan, or are you waiting for just happen, or how it's going that?
Yeah, so Arbitrum is a layer 2, right? It actually settles on Ethereum. So I think the overall Ethereum ecosystem has planned to make the transactions as cheap as possible. And right now, a transaction on Arbitrum costs half a cent on average. So it's already in a decent kind of like scale. But I think it will become another order of magnitude cheaper as soon as Ethereum becomes cheaper, right? Which is supposed to happen with the next upgrade. And for sure within this year. And then yes, Arbitrum is continuously like the off-chain lab teams, which is the team that is building actually Arbitrum with R&D and engineering, is constantly like shipping innovation in this sense to make it as cheap as possible. It will never become, I think because of the security level that Arbitrum has, it will never become as cheap as other chains. But what the Arbitrum ecosystem does is that you can spin up your own chain if you want, right? If you want to rely on different trust assumptions that are a little bit less secure, you can be extremely cheap. And so you can provide transactions that are basically free for your users, so you can sponsor them. And so this is kind of the direction that I see it going. Things will become cheaper in the overall ecosystem for sure, in the overall Ethereum ecosystem, and it's already half a cent, so it's already pretty decent. But then if you want extremely cheap for gaming use case, for example, people will end up spinning up their own chains and then provide like a frame, like a transactions for 1/100th of a cent maybe. So similar to Solana.